traveling with the president in West Palm Beach, Florida.
And Scott Lucas is a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham in England. Joins me now via Skype, and thanks for doing so, Professor. The impeachment investigation, we've seen it in the Intelligence Committee. That's where the drama was. It's now Judiciary Committee. How different might that look? And do you think the Trump administration will take part?
Well, the House Intelligence Committee was sort of like a grand jury, where you assembled the evidence. You had 17 witnesses behind closed doors, 12 of them in public. And then the House Intelligence Committee has to, almost in effect serving as a grand jury, say, is there enough weight of evidence here to proceed to the next stage? The House Judiciary Committee, on the other hand, will probably not hear from a great deal of new witnesses on the evidence. They'll talk to constitutional lawyers about whether these are impeachable offenses, specifically whether this constitutes bribery. If the lawyers say yes, then the House Committee will then Judiciary Committee will draft articles of impeachment. Those articles of impeachment will be voted on, and in effect, the House Judiciary Committee will be the procedural body that is saying yes or no. Is there enough evidence? And if they say yes, there is an article of impeachment here, bribery and possibly obstruction of justice, they then pass that to the full House for a vote, possibly before the Christmas recess.
Yeah, Donald Trump has been strangely quiet on Twitter the last week or so. In fact, the Twitterverse has been commenting on that. But he did tweet today. I mean, I think it was his only direct tweet other than retweets. And he said this: "I will be representing our country in London at NATO while the Democrats are holding the most ridiculous impeachment hearings in history. Read the transcripts. Nothing was done or said wrong. The radical left is undercutting our country. Hearings scheduled on the same dates as NATO." I mean, is it undercutting the country holding these hearings?
No. Look, let's be very clear about what Donald Trump or perhaps his staff are doing this weekend, and that is the next phase of trying to block this inquiry. They first tried to block it by preventing any witnesses from showing up, telling current and former officials to defy subpoenas. Now, that didn't work. 17 current and former officials testified, including Trump's former ally, Ambassador Gordon Sondland. So the second stage begins, and that is you delegitimize the hearings. You try to tear down the witnesses, even saying that Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was disloyal to the United States and loyal to Ukraine. If you can't tear down the witnesses and you can't say the hearings are illegitimate, third stage, you say, look, this is a wonderful president, and look, he's doing great things for the economy, great things to keep migrants from coming into the United States, great things everywhere, and you're stopping him from doing a great job. Fact of the matter is that the biggest problem for Donald Trump in getting legislation passed since 2017 is Donald Trump. The biggest problem for NATO is not the impeachment hearings, it's that Donald Trump is unpredictable and tends to insult former leaders. So no, time to keep your eye on the ball and not get dust thrown in your eyes.
I think there's the House has passed 400 bills that Mitch McConnell has not brought up for a vote in the Senate, so that's a little do nothing. Donald Trump, as we said, he's going to NATO. He's not going to be many friends there to greet him. I mean, even one of his allies, Boris Johnson, has warned Trump. He warned him to stay quiet on the upcoming general election. You know, you've got other NATO leaders who resent Trump's admonishments. I mean, how do you see it going? Do you see a disruptive Trump again?
Well, I've got a well-placed colleague here in the UK who refers to him as a human hand grenade. And that is, you don't know when Trump will go off. In the past, at NATO summits, he's turned his back on other leaders. He has insulted the Germans. He has threatened to walk out of the alliance completely before U.S. officials pulled that back. And he's just simply a disruption for NATO. NATO has serious issues, but they're not just issues about finance. They're issues about tactics, about strategy, especially facing a very, let's say, forthright Russian challenge in Eastern Europe and other areas. And Donald Trump gets in the way of discussing those issues. You have to sort of discuss around his back. Beyond that, look, Boris Johnson's people are worried because Donald Trump 3 weeks ago, nearly sabotaged the prime minister's campaign by saying that he wants a no-deal Brexit. In other words, he wants the UK to crash out of the European Union. And Boris Johnson is saying, but look, I have this wonderful deal to the British people, vote for me. Will Trump cause his former ally more problems? we'll wait and see.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one other thing on NATO too. You've got the role of Turkey as a NATO member, yet Turkey buying air defence systems from Russia, a NATO critic and foe, of course, and in fact working alongside Russia, joint patrols in northern Syria. A couple of days ago, you had Mr. Erdogan telling the French president to check, quote, whether he is brain dead. That was after Mr. Macron said NATO was on life support. I'm just trying to imagine a fairly awkward atmosphere with Turkey there.
Well, I mean, President Erdogan's a fairly crafty politician, and he is playing off NATO versus Moscow. I don't think it'll be in his interest to tear up the NATO summit, even if President Macron may not be too friendly towards him after recent comments. I think the big problem here that you really point to is that a space was opened up really by, I think, the failure of U.S. policy on Syria, and not just during the Trump administration. That indecision, uncertainty, inability to protect civilians has led both Turkey and Russia to intervene, in some cases to deadly effect. And so Turkey and Russia are there while the U.S. is sidelined. That's a bigger problem for NATO. It's one that goes beyond Donald Trump, and one that will not immediately be resolved at this summit.
Yeah, good point. Professor Scott Lucas of the University of Birmingham. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, a plane crash in the US has left 9 people dead, including